Well, good afternoon, everybody, and hello from a relatively sunny and warm day here in Sydney. It's just gone 1 p.m. In the afternoon on Wednesday, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all our attendees to our panel session today. Before I kick off and introduce myself and our panel, just to let you know that we're going to ask for a quick poll with regards to how everyone's audio visual is working. So we just want to make sure that everybody is not having any problems. And if you could just let us know that you can hear us and you can see the presentation, that would be great. And we can work with you if there are any problems. So thank you very much for doing that. So to kick off this afternoon's session, I am really delighted to at least welcome you virtually in some ways to the University of Sydney. My name is Sean O'Reilly, and I am Head of Research Education in the Faculty of Medicine and Health. So my team in the faculty is responsible really for supporting our HDR candidates and indeed their supervisors in providing all the support and knowledge that they need to ensure that they can actually do the very best research possible at the university within the faculty. So it's a great position to have, and we get to meet so many of our excellent HDR candidates within our Faculty of Medicine and Health. Vitally though today, as part of our HDR in STEM student panel, I am actually joined by some of our current research students, which I'm really excited about. They are, as you'll see on the slide there, Nishanti from Science, Juan Pablo from Engineering, and Claudia from my own Faculty of Medicine and Health. You'll have an opportunity to hear from them in just a few moments. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and give you a little bit of an insight into the work that they are doing. We have a really good spread of students from across the various different disciplines, I suppose, that we work in here at the university under the STEM banner: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and of course, medicine and health. And I think really, if you're a potential research student thinking about coming to study with us at Sydney, you can do nothing better than hear from some of our current students and the work that they are doing and the activities that they're doing as a research student. Because I think for many of us, when we commence research degrees, we might not necessarily know what we're getting ourselves into. And it's a good thing to hear from some of the current candidates in that regard. So you'll hear from them in just a moment's time after I give you just really a brief introduction to research at Sydney and some of the things that we think it's important for you to consider as a potential research student. So vitally, I think what's important for any potential candidates who are thinking about attending Sydney as a higher degree by research student is to realize that the university is very much committed and focused on research. As a university, we have two primary missions. The first is to educate, and that's to educate our students and the next generation of thinkers, but also it's to ensure that we are conducting really high quality research and bringing that research into the classroom. So very much at the University of Sydney, that relationship between research and education is a symbiotic relationship. And the research that we do on our campus is really there to support our educational mission as well. So what that means really is that the research we are doing is seeking to create new knowledge. And when I speak to a lot of higher degree by research candidates, that's something that I think is really important to them and really vital to them as research candidates, that they are contributing to the creation of new knowledge. And I think at somewhere like the University of Sydney, that it's very important to bear that in mind, and it's very possible to actually make that contribution to your discipline and to your research area. Sydney is recognized internationally as being one of the leading research intensive universities anywhere in the globe. As you'll see, some of our rankings from the recent QS rankings this year are very positive. We rank consistently in the top 50 universities anywhere in the world. Our graduates are seen as vitally important and of really excellent quality. And I think for research students, that's becoming more and more important as we move through into the 21st century. For many research candidates, the usual pathway and trajectory through career was to obviously move into something like academia, to begin work at a university. And we are really beginning to realize that that's not necessarily the trajectory that many of our candidates are seeking to follow upon completion of their research degrees. So I think having the backing of a university like Sydney that will enable you to become a really well-rounded graduate while also having that very detailed and expert knowledge in your research area. However, while ensuring that we're giving you the skills and expertise to go on and do other things and to apply that knowledge and expertise in other industries outside of academia is also something that's of vital importance to our candidates. At the same time, I think what's very important to recognise is that Sydney is seen internationally here in Australia, but also around the world, as being an impactful university. And that's something that we are very cognizant of at the university and something that we are very proud of as an institution. I think, again, as we've moved into the 21st century, as we see ourselves facing things like the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and now obviously facing some of these very, very specific and difficult challenges as related to the COVID pandemic, ensuring that our university and our research candidates and our academic researchers are doing research that has a meaningful impact is something that's very important to the university. I think researchers are now being asked more and more by government bodies, by state funding agencies, by international funders to show why their research is valuable, to show that their research is making an impact. And that, of course, can be economically, but also in a social or cultural setting as well. And I think somewhere like Sydney is very, very sure and secure in its ability to maintain an impactful research agenda. And that's something that's of vital importance, I think, to our research candidates as well, because we try to train our candidates to really be able to showcase why their research is important and that the research that they are doing should be supported and engaged with. And I think that's something that we are very, very keen to do at the University of Sydney. And as I note there on that slide, recognised internationally in that regard. Something else that I think has become very apparent as we all, I suppose, struggle through these very strange and difficult times in many instances is that our international connections and our partnerships on a global scale are of vital importance, I think now more than ever. Sydney is an institution that has always had an international outlook, whether that's by bringing international researchers to our campus and having that expertise and experience and knowledge available to our candidates, but also actually ensuring that we connect with fellow like-minded researchers right across the globe. So we actually, as an institution, have over 250 international partners, and they range from obviously partnerships with many, many universities in the US, in Europe, across Australasia and so on, but also with government bodies and agencies, community groups, and industry partners right around the world as well. So I think that ability to connect and to tie into that international network is a very, very valuable and important piece of a research experience at the University of Sydney that is very valuable to our research candidates. And that's something that we're very, very proud of. And we'll continue to seek to build those kinds of partnerships and connectivity with international colleagues right around the world now and into the future. And as I say, that seems, I think, even more important now than at any time in the recent past. At the same time, the university is also committed to multidisciplinary research. And you'll hear from a number of our panelists today who obviously work within our very particular and specific faculties or university schools. But at the same time, Sydney as an institution is committed to multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary research. And that's very important because we want to ensure that in places like our many research institutes and research centres, we give people and students in particular the opportunity to connect with the expertise and research expertise that's valuable and viable for their research projects. So we want to ensure that you have that opportunity to actually not just hear from people within your own discipline or within your own school, but actually to engage with people from other disciplines and ensure that we're answering the big questions by bringing all of them, the relevant people into the room. Again, I think something that's very, very apparent during the times of a global pandemic that we find ourselves in. It is really, really important that we connect to the right expertise and the right knowledge at the right time to ensure that we can answer these questions in the best possible way. I think one example of that commitment to multidisciplinary research is somewhere like the Charles Perkins Centre. It's a place where many of my colleagues from the Faculty of Medicine and Health are based, and they work with colleagues from right across the university. So the Charles Perkins Centre, or the CPC, was first established really to try to tackle a number of particular concerns in the health of society with a focus on diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. So three, I think, major health concerns that we face here in Australia, but also right around the world. But the key part of the key mission of the Charles Perkins Centre was not just to tie into the expertise evident in our Faculty of Medicine and Health. And of course, there are many clinicians and medical scientists and health scientists working in the CPC, but also to enable us to actually connect with colleagues from across the sciences in areas such as engineering or architecture, in philosophy, and even in the social sciences and the arts, to ensure that people who wanted to work on these major health challenges could be brought together in a meaningful way and could actually contribute to us solving some of those big questions in many of those areas. And I think the CPC, as an institute and as a structure within our campus, the university invested over 350 million Australian dollars to establish the CPC a number of years ago, is really a visible representation of Sydney's commitment to our multidisciplinary research on our campus that allows people to connect right across our disciplines in a very real way. Another good representation of that is the Sydney Nano Institute. Sydney Nano obviously has a focus on nanotechnology, the clue is in the name, and they are tackling a whole range of very interesting and very, I suppose, important and relevant research projects in areas such as energy and environment, thinking about clean energy and the role nanotech has to play in that particular area. In health and medicine, for example, understanding how we can assess disease and health challenges on a nanoscale, or indeed how we can ensure that we have new pathways for drug targeting, again, on that nanoscale. And of course, nanotechnology is playing more and more of a vital role in areas such as communication, computing, and cybersecurity, to ensure that we're getting faster, greener, and smarter ways of processing information, and the way in which we use that information can actually be improved upon and done in a better and far faster way. And I think Sydney Nano, again, is a very good representation of an area where we bring many expertise from across our disciplines together to ensure that we are tackling these kinds of questions in a meaningful way and enabling people to connect with the appropriate expertise and the appropriate research experience and knowledge when it's vital and of importance to their research project. So again, I think these are things that are relevant to potential research candidates. This gives you an idea of the drivers behind some of the research activity that we undertake here at the University of Sydney, and our approach in many respects to research at the University of Sydney. So if any of that sounds exciting and sounds like something that you might be interested in getting involved in, I really do encourage you to log into our website, have a look at our Sydney courses page, which is where you can make applications to our degree programs. But briefly to say, I think the two primary research degrees at the university very much happen in the master's space, and they're either our Master of Philosophy programs, or indeed across the Arts and Humanities, our Masters of Research degrees, or indeed, of course, our primary research degree is our Doctor of Philosophy program. In terms of a Master of Philosophy program, most candidates will complete that in probably 1.5 to 1 3/4 years, whereas our Doctor of Philosophy program does take between 3.5 and 4 years to complete. Really, in terms of what the difference is between those programs, is that really it's the size and the scope of the research project that the candidate might be undertaking. Many students use the MPhil and the master's programs as a stepping stone, if you will, into a PhD. But many students also recognize that an MPhil or a master's program is actually the right program for them and the kind of program that they want to undertake. So that can be based on personal requirements, or for example, if people are also undertaking professional work at the same time as their degree, they might not have the time to commit to a PhD program. It also might be that the research project itself is very much of the size and the scope for a master's project as opposed to a PhD. So it is very important that when you approach supervisors at the university and potential academics who might supervise your research as a HDR candidate, it's really important to talk to them about what it is you are trying to get out of this degree, and what your end point is in terms of the kinds of research pathway that you're trying to craft for yourself. So those are just two options, however, but most of our research candidates are undertaking a Master of Philosophy or indeed a PhD program here at the university. And those are available really across the breadth of our faculties. So not just within our STEM faculties, but also in other areas such as the arts and humanities, in the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, for example, and other areas as well. Although primarily a lot of our candidates in those STEM disciplines are undertaking the degrees in those areas. For example, in the Faculty of Medicine and Health, our new PhD program, which is a PhD in Medicine and Health, is a faculty-wide PhD program, which again tries to recognise the multidisciplinary areas and focus of our degrees as a university, and that's something that we are trying to enhance in Medicine and Health in particular. So just to come to the end of this part of the presentation, and before I open this up to some Q&A with our panel and to hear from our students as well, just to say that we have got a range of research periods at the university, and this is to give flexibility to students to undertake their degrees with us at different times. So this does enable you to start your candidature at different points in the academic year, so we are not aligned to the same semesters as some of our coursework or undergraduate students. But we have 4 research periods across the university, and many of our faculties give students the opportunity to commence their degrees at different points in that academic year. Again, I think this is recognizing that for many research students, they are not necessarily tied to that same kind of year structure as those in undergraduate degrees or indeed in postgraduate coursework degrees, and may have other things going on in life that requires that little bit of flexibility. I think it is important to say that not all faculties offer all research periods, but most will have an opportunity for students to commence at different times in their candidature, or at different times in the year to commence their candidature. I always advise students that if you are thinking about submitting an application for a research program at the university, please do so as well and as far in advance as is possible. If you are beginning to think about your research degree, really it is vital that you submit your application to our admissions team so that they have time to make that assessment, to pass that application to the faculty for assessment as well and review, and that we can get back to you in time with an outcome of that application in advance of the research periods that you might like to commence with us. I think this is vitally important as well for international candidates who also have to think about international student visas and so on, which can take a little bit of time to process. So we would recommend very much that if you have a particular research period in mind as when you would like to commence, please do ensure that you try to get your application to us as early as possible in that process. So that's just a very, very quick overview of some of the kind of the main factors when considering a research degree at the University of Sydney. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to invite our panelists to join me on screen, and what we're going to do is we're going to open up this presentation now to a little bit of a Q&A. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to give you a bit of background to their research areas and what they're focusing on. And then we have had a number of questions come through over the Q&A function in the last little while. So I'm going to just give it a moment to unshare the screen here, which we should be able to do. And then we can have our panelists join us for this presentation part of the session. So first and foremost, I might turn to you, Nishanti, if that's okay. So as I mentioned earlier, folks, we are delighted to be joined by a range of representatives from our current HDR candidates across the university, really representing our main focuses in science, tech, engineering, maths, and medicine and health. And what I might say, Nishanti, if you wouldn't mind maybe just kicking us off, just introducing yourself, maybe giving us a view of what your research project is focusing on at the moment. And maybe tell us a little bit, why did you decide to undertake a research degree? It's a big ask, and it's a big step to take. So I'd be really interested to hear from you on that.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, so I'm Nishanti, and I am a PhD student in the School of Chemistry within the Faculty of Science. And so my overall research project that I've been doing, that I will be trying to complete for my whole PhD, is to develop new therapies for stroke. So I'm a synthetic chemist, so I work in the lab making new molecules day to day, which I find really fun. And the project that I'm working on right now involves I'm making one component of funnel web spider venom, which our biologist collaborators have found can actually reduce the extent of brain damage that occurs in mice after a stroke. So now I'm trying to make large quantities of it so we can test in humans. So I find this project really super interesting to work on. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do research, was because I love science and I love learning about the world around us, but I decided that I wanted to sort of contribute my own knowledge and sort of try and discover some new things that people might then also be able to learn about.
Great, thanks very much, Nishanti. That's fantastic. And I think for any of us who live here in Australia, and specifically in Sydney, I think we're always very excited to hear that people are doing research into funnel web spiders. They're scary beasts, I think, for many of us. So I'm very impressed that that must have taken a little bit of bravery on your part to start working with them.
Yeah.
One, I might ask the same question of you, if I could, please. So I know you are a candidate in our Faculty of Engineering, so maybe you could introduce yourself and give us a little bit of insights into your research project and what you're working on at this moment.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Thank you, Sean. Thanks everybody for being here. Nice to meet you all. My name is Juan Molina and I'm a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Engineering. My background is in health. Besides my PhD, I also work at the University Library and teach at the School of IT. My research is in the field of computational biology, and I combine biology and computer simulations with the goal of intervening the community of microbes we have in our guts to improve health. The reason why I chose the University of Sydney was because it was one of the very few universities that offered me the opportunity of combining health and technology in a compelling way. Before starting my PhD, I did a Master of Health Technology Innovation here, where I picked up most of the engineering skills and knowledge I needed, and that I'm currently applying in this new degree.
Great, fantastic one. I think that's a really good example of, as you rightly say yourself, the ability to work across so many disciplines. Certainly I know from my own experience and my own research, we can often get very focused on our, let's be honest, sometimes quite small area of research that we find very important, and our supervisors and our lab teams are obviously very engaged with, but it can only just be one small part of a much bigger picture. And that ability, therefore, to work across those disciplines and connect with people who may be able to help you and support you, I think is really, really valuable. So thanks for that insight, much appreciated. And Claudia, obviously someone else who is working in the medicine and health fields, in my own Faculty of Medicine and Health. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into what you're working on at this moment in time? And again, what drove you to undertake a research degree at university?
Yeah, so my name's Claudia and I'm part of the Faculty of Medicine and Health, more specifically the Department of Pharmacology. And my focus is on the field of neuropharmacology, so basically any drug that affects the brain or nervous system. So my research focuses on pain. So pain is our body's natural response to warn us of something harmful, and it's quite vital to our survival. When you have a severe injury, usually you'll have a hypersensitivity to this area, and this prevents you from further damaging the area and also gives it time to heal. However, sometimes even after your injury is healed, you end up with this hypersensitivity sticking around, and this can be described as chronic pain. So to feel pain, generally what you need is a pain stimulus touching your body somewhere. This will send a message from the point of contact up through your spinal cord into your brain where pain is perceived. In chronic pain, however, the pathways in your spinal cord kind of get rewired and jumbled up, which results in the messages being crossed over. So what that results in is a normal touch sensation going up your spinal cord, crossing into your pain pathway and being perceived as pain. So my research focuses on understanding these changes in the spinal cord and also potential ways of treating it with new medications. So I chose to do research at the University of Sydney. Basically, it started back when I was in high school. I did a week of work experience at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research, and I noticed when I was there that everyone there basically had a degree from either Sydney Uni or UNSW. And I'd always loved Sydney Uni, you know, the prestige, the beautiful campus and everything. So that's what made me decide to go here in the first place. But once I'd completed my undergraduate degree and I was looking at doing honours and then later a PhD, it was really, as Sean mentioned, the community of scientists here. Specifically in my department of pharmacology, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with so many different labs and learn from so many different scientists over my whole research journey here. And it's just been amazing.
Fantastic, Claudia. Thank you very much. I think that kind of pathway to your PhD program is one that's really valuable to share. I think it can be a common pathway for many, and it's something that I think we're quite used to seeing people progress through an honours program or indeed into a master's or indeed straight into a PhD from there. I think it is important to say that at the university we are beginning to see more and more people return from professional roles, from a working life, and coming back to a research degree at a later stage, which I think is also very, very valuable. But I think that's really something that for me has become very apparent in the roles that I've worked in, is that really our researchers are coming from all walks of life, many, many different backgrounds, lots of different expertise and experience, but like you say, are drawn together to really engage with a community of scholars, I suppose, and a lot of like-minded individuals who are just driving forward to try and do some good, I suppose, in the research that they're undertaking, which from the sound of your project, and as someone who suffers from chronic back pain, I'm very excited to hear that the work you're working on might someday help me and help others who probably
hopefully
are dealing with some slip discs and so on as well. So we have got a range of questions that have come in from our audience that I'll work through now. And the first question that I have here is just from, I can't see the name, I think it's an anonymous question, but it just says, come in to say, can you speak to any of the kind of challenges and opportunities that you felt you have had since undertaking your degree? So I think we spoke about this earlier. Is there anything that you wish you knew now, or you knew at the beginning of your degree that you know now? And where have some of the challenges been as being a research student? Because I think, again, these things, each candidature is somewhat unique in terms of a research degree. So I am just wondering if any of you would like to maybe speak to that, some of the challenges that you've faced, or some of the things that you're most proud of as part of your research experience to date. Nishanti, would you be happy to talk to that?
Yeah, sure. So I've definitely faced a fair share of challenges, I would say, in the lab. But I think it's what I've learned, and what I maybe wish that I knew at the start, was that is so normal in experimental science. So constantly experiments will fail, and usually you can work out why, like you can look at all your parameters and so on, but sometimes you're just not going to be able to work out why it hasn't worked. And it can be really distressing if you've spent a lot of time working towards getting this one particular result. But I guess what I know now is that that's going to happen all the time, and I have to just get over that and then try the next experiment. So I think that's something that's common amongst a lot of different fields of science, and that is definitely one of the biggest challenges.
And I suppose even as part of that, something that is therefore inherent in your research degree and your research training is the ability to pick yourself back up when something just doesn't work out, and the ability to take that on the chin and say, okay, on to the next step. What's the next question we can answer? Is there a new way we can think about this particular part of the project? And I think that kind of ingenuity is something that's often very, very apparent in research graduates, the ability to adapt to changing situations. And when something doesn't work, well, not to actually see that as an inassailable setback or obstacle, but actually to make us think about it differently and say, right, we need to maybe change the direction a little bit. And I know certainly from working with my own students, that's something that they talk about regularly. Is it's very seldom in life we're actually given the opportunity that if something doesn't work, to go back and have a little think about it and give it another shot. So I think that having that chance to do that during a research degree, just to be given an opportunity to sit and to think about things is quite a privilege in some ways, I would say. So thank you for that, Nishanti, much appreciated. The next question I have, Juan, you might tackle this one for me, because I think it comes back to something you mentioned earlier on. But a question from one of our attendees that says, how did you actually choose the research project that you wanted to work on? How did you come up with your research proposal, and kind of what drew you specifically to the research project that you found yourself working on now?
Right. That's a really good question. Well, what happened in my case was that as part of my master's, I got to learn about different projects that were available on campus, and I got to meet a few different researchers. A few of them were they were in charge of units of study that I was doing, or maybe I met them at networking events. So I think that's really, really important. Just try to look for what the opportunities are in each of our cases. But then what happened in my case is that I found a project that sounded really interesting and that was already aligned with a lot of my goals. And I started working with that supervisor during my master's as part of my master's thesis. And then that same project just evolved into the project I'm working at the moment as my PhD. Yeah, so basically, I think that just it's really hard to find a project that 100% aligns with what you are trying to do, right? You also need to be willing to adapt to what opportunities are out there. So that's something that's also important to keep in mind.
Great, excellent. Thanks very much, Juan. I think that is just vital insight and advice in many respects. We're not always going to have, there's not always going to be a project that perfectly aligns with the kind of research that we want to undertake. But seeking out that project where you feel a bit of an affinity with the work that's ongoing, with the lab, with the group, with the supervisor in particular, is vitally important. And I think something that I know I've spoken to a lot of our candidates about is that the fact that, and it comes back maybe to Nishanti's point as well, is that our research project often will change directions. So at the beginning of particularly maybe a PhD program that's going to last 3.5 to 4 years, the questions that we ask at the very beginning of that degree and that project might actually look very, very different halfway through or by the end of the project. And again, that's not something to be afraid of, but actually that is the process of research. And new questions become available to us and allow us to see things in a new light. So I think that is really, really good advice to say, look, you know, get engaged with a project that excites you, that you're passionate about. It might not always or tick all the boxes, but you don't necessarily know where that project is going to end up by the time you are completing a PhD program, let alone moving on into a research career after you complete your degree at the university. There's so many doors that might open. And actually, we have a really good follow-up question, actually, one after your comments that I might throw to you, Claudia, if that's possible. And it was just, could you tell us a little bit about actually finding your supervisor? What was the process you went through to identify a supervisor, and what drew you to that individual in particular?
Yep, so my supervisor is Professor McDonald Christie in the Department of Pharmacology. And basically at the end of my undergrad degree, I knew that I wanted to go into honours. So I just took the initiative and looked at all the different pharmacology supervisors that were out there. I really liked the research that was being done in Professor Christie's lab. So I sent him an email and asked if I could do some volunteer stuff in his lab, which he was very responsive to and very excited to have an eager student there wanting to learn. So I did that initially. And then also pharmacology, I'm not sure if they still do this now, but when I was in undergrad, they did a thing called an elective project. So you basically picked a supervisor in the pharmacology department, you did a few weeks of a tiny little project with them, and it's a good way of getting to test the different supervisors, what they do and how you like the different subject areas. So I did one with someone else in Professor Christie's lab, and I just really liked everything they were doing. Professor Christie enjoyed having me there. I guess I made a good impression. And then from then on, it was just basically, I said to him that I wanted to do an honours project, and that was it. But I think it's also important that when you are picking a supervisor, you have to go and speak to lots of people, because I happened to, find the right one and it was a good fit straight away, but I still did go and speak to quite a few other supervisors just to make sure that I was making the right decision and there wasn't another one out there that maybe I enjoyed a little bit more. Because that relationship between your student and supervisor is really important, and it's going to be like really beneficial for you going through honours or even a PhD or master's later on, if you work really well together. So that's how I did it.
That's great. Nishanti, yes, please.
So I just wanted to quickly add something, because I thought this might be useful for people who are not coming through from the University of Sydney, because I did my undergrad elsewhere, so I didn't have the chance to do like a research project with my current supervisor or go and speak to people directly. So what I actually did was a little bit of reading about that. So in the areas that I were interested in, I had a look at people who were publishing frequently in that area and publishing in good journals, and also people who were getting funding from the government or other sources, so they were getting a lot of grants. And that was the way that I found my supervisor, and then emailed him and had some meetings. So just for people who are from elsewhere, don't be scared to look, don't be scared to email people out of the blue, even if you've never been to the University of Sydney before.
Great. I think, look, that is fantastic. You covered off a point I was going to make and follow up to Claudia's point, because I think we've really seen two of the really common pathways in terms of people identifying supervisors from both of your advice. There is those scenarios where you've had the opportunity to work with that colleague before, you've had a chance to kind of test the lab or see if the projects that they have on offer are something that would be interesting to you. But there's also those scenarios, and there are plenty of students who come to the University of Sydney who haven't undertaken an undergraduate degree or an honours programme with us. And therefore, I think the advice you've given there, Nishant, is really important, because it is vital, really, that you take the time to understand what are the big questions that are being asked in your area of interest. Who is doing the cutting edge research? Who is engaged with these particular problems that I want to answer as part of my research program? And I think that sometimes that can come as not as a shock, but as a little bit of a surprise to potential research candidates. Because unlike a coursework degree, which I think often, if you go onto any university website, you'll see a coursework program. It's very clearly detailed. It tells you exactly what you're going to do, almost down to, every week and semester, you're going to look at this, this, and this. And by the end, we're going to sit 3 exams, and you're going to answer those exams. If you get the grade, you get the degree. If you don't, you don't. It's such a very, very different process, I think, for thinking about a research degree. And then for me, I have often found it's almost flipped on its head. In many ways, as a potential research candidate, you need to think about that project yourself. You need to think about, what is it that excites me? What am I interested in? What are the questions that I would like to ask? And then from that point, then you actually go and see who's working in those areas. And then hopefully, if all works out well and you get a positive response from those supervisors, you can start working on a finalized project together. And I think that's really important for potential candidates to realize. You don't have to have it all figured out at the very beginning. The advice and expertise and guidance that you will get from your potential supervisor is of real importance, and they will help you shape how the project will look. I think from my own experience, whenever I speak to potential PhD candidates, for example, they come with an extensive research plan that would be a lifetime's worth of research to undertake, let alone 3 years of research under a PhD program. And the same for master's students who are looking at 1 to 2 years worth of a research degree. You might just take one small part of the big research questions that candidates have, and that will actually form the basis of the degree program. But I think that's really good advice from both of you in terms of, the different pathways to finding supervisors. And the one thing I will add to that is, as you said, Randy, if you are engaging with somebody who you haven't spoken to before, who might not be aware of you, who hasn't had an opportunity to hear from you before, I think it is important to recognize that is, it's a formal engagement, it's a formal correspondence. I often advise students to think of this as this is the job interview. It's the first part of the job interview, and it's really important not to say, hey, how's it going? I'd really like to, it's important to speak to the strengths of that supervisor, why you feel you as a research student and your research ideas are compatible with theirs. I think your advice around saying, I've read some of your recent work in X journal or this journal here or that journal is vitally important, because it shows supervisors that you're actively engaged. The worst thing students can do is to write a very generic email that gets the name of the university wrong, that calls the supervisor by the wrong name. I have seen all of this happen, and expect to get a response in that regard. It's really important, in a sense, in advance of applying, in advance of approaching a research supervisor, to do your research. Do your research on that person, on the projects that they're working on, the kinds of grants that they're winning. I think that's a great piece of advice. And that's the kind of thing that will enable you to have a positive experience and positive responses from potential supervisors early in that correspondence. I think this is a really important piece to talk about, and that's why I've dwelt on it a little bit, because it's something that comes up very, very regularly for research candidates. So thank you for your insights into that. I'm just looking at some more of our questions here. We have a couple of, I suppose, more administrative related questions that I might just try and answer quickly. So what are the possible scholarship opportunities that are available from the University of Sydney? So to put it simply, there are lots. There are different types of scholarships with different types of terms and conditions, and are relevant to different students with different backgrounds, whether you're a domestic student, an international student, whether you're working in medicine and health, whether you're working in engineering. So there's a whole range of scholarships available across the university. And the best thing to do is to take a bit of time and get onto our scholarships website and review those scholarships that are available to university or to HDR candidates. What I can say to try and simplify that a little bit is that there's primarily three key types of scholarships. The first are those scholarships that are funded by the Australian government. They are known as the RTP, or the Research Training Programme scholarships. They are scholarships that are provided by the Australian government, and they are provided to both domestic and international students. To win an RTP scholarship is highly competitive. I should say to win any scholarship at the University of Sydney is highly competitive. It's fair to say that we get many, many more applications than for scholarships than scholarships we have available. But that's probably the first batch of scholarships that are available, which are government-funded scholarships. There are then university-funded scholarships, which are funded from the university's own budget, again, applicable to domestic and international students. And then, very importantly, there are faculty-level scholarships. So these are scholarships that are often for research in specific areas, and sometimes for research in very particular projects and very specific projects. So it does really take a little bit of time to make sure, once you've kind of settled on a research degree, the faculty that you want to work in, and the project that you want to work on, it's really important to go and have a look at those scholarships that are available and see what might apply to you. Some are very, very particular and are only available to very, very specific research projects. Others are a little bit more general. So it's important to read what is available, what the terms and conditions of those scholarships, and what the application process is for those scholarships, because different scholarships have different applications processes involved. For the research training program and for the RTP scholarships and for some of the university level scholarships, application is that you can include your application for scholarship as part of your admission application as well. But for other scholarships, there might be an extra layer of a process that you need to go through. So it's important to take some time to read those scholarships and to review what are available. And I'm always asked, are they easy to get? No, that's the simple answer. They are hugely competitive. We would love to fund every single student, of course, but the reality is that all those scholarships are finite, but we seek to support some really great H2O students on campus with the range of scholarships that are available. Well, I might turn to you with the next question, which I think is a really, really good one, and we may have touched on it, but what skills and attributes do you think actually make a really good research supervisor? So not just your experience as a student, but what is it that actually helped you pick out your supervisor, and what are the attributes that you feel students should look out for in their supervisors when they're trying to make that selection?
Right, that's a really, really good question. Well, I think that there are a few skills that you need. For example, discipline is one of them. It's probably the one at the top of my list, but also you need to be like self-driven and very organized with your project, because when you start your PhD, maybe for the first couple of months, your supervisor will be there trying to guide you until you get the hang of the project or what you're actually supposed to do, which sometimes is not that clear when you start. But then you're expected to be self-sufficient, right? You're supposed to run the project by yourself, and your supervisor will come back to you, ask you a couple of questions. You can also ask a couple of questions for guidance and everything, but then it's up to you to do everything pretty much even sometimes find new innovative ways to make your project work. So discipline and being self-driven are on the top of my list. Other very important characteristics of us as students, as PhDs, and also as general supervisors or researchers in general, is that you need to be curious, right? You need to feel the need of learning and also that sense of curiosity, trying to feel the urge to discover new things that are probably ideally aligned with your project. That's fundamental. And if you find a supervisor who's really motivated by that, then probably he or she is the right one. Because somebody who has lost that sense of curiosity is probably not ideal to be supervising other people's projects. Yep.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I mean, we've been doing Zoom meetings for a long time and I still have trouble unmuting myself.
Yeah, that happens every
well,
time.
I think that is an actual excellent piece of advice, because it is vitally important that when you're talking to a supervisor and you're assessing, is this the right person for me to work with, that relationship is very key, but you do want that supervisor actually to be passionate and engaged with your project. If that's someone who, you know, doesn't necessarily feel your project is that important and so on, it's completely justified to say, well, maybe hang on, this person mightn't be the right person for me to work with. And I think that is important for students to recognize and for potential candidates to recognize that that decision about who your supervisor is going to be rests entirely with you. This is a two-way relationship. It's not just a student presenting themselves and, you know, begging for someone to supervise them. This is actually about you saying, well, hang on, what can this supervisor provide me as a researcher? What are the benefits and the opportunities that supervisor will provide me? And it can come down to something as very much fundamental, like you mentioned, Juan, as someone who is actually passionate and excited about your research project. But it also can come down to things like, well, does this supervisor encourage students to publish during their degree program? Do they give them opportunities to network or invite them to go to conferences and spend, you know, time away from the university to do field work and things like that? So these are all the kinds of questions that I think it's worth asking yourself when assessing if a supervisor is right for you. And I fully agree that at the base of all of that should be a question that every potential candidate asks themselves. Is this supervisor going to be excited about the work I'm going to do? Because if they are, that's when you're going to get the kind of engagement you want and the kind of support and backing. While recognizing, as you rightly say, Juan, that actually this is, you know, your PhD and the project that you undertake is your project, and you are owning that as a researcher, and that's an important aspect of undertaking a research degree, is that this is something that you will produce. It will be your name on that thesis at the end of the process, and it's something that you as an individual and as a researcher should be happy to stand over and to defend in many respects, because that's ultimately what we are doing in the production of theses. We are coming up with ideas, we are making our arguments, and we are defending our conclusions as researchers. And that's really good training for later research careers, or indeed any careers that we might go into. I have a couple of other questions that have come through on the chat as well. There has been lots and lots of questions around COVID-19 and the coronavirus. A couple of, I suppose, I'm going to try and bring them together if I can. The first batch of questions are asking about the impact on candidatures and on research at the university because of the restrictions that we are now all experiencing because of COVID. And the others are focused on what kind of work the university is doing in response to the COVID pandemic. I'll try and answer the second one first, and the simple answer is lots. A whole raft of our colleagues right across the university, and indeed our students, from our undergraduate students right through to our HDR candidates, so much of the university community has really mobilized to try and address, I suppose, so many of the challenges that we are facing at the moment. One of my colleagues, Easy, has actually shared a link through to a very good page on our website that is giving quite detailed insights into some of the work that the university is doing. I think in working in somewhere like the Faculty of Medicine and Health, and Claudia, you might agree with me on this, the response to the COVID pandemic, you know, from across our research community, but but also our colleagues and our students who are also clinicians, has just been, I think, exceptional, really, really exceptional. And it's something I think that the university is very proud of. So there is lots and lots of work going into COVID research to find a cure, but there's also a lot of practical work. Our School of Pharmacy, for example, in the last month or so has started to produce lots and lots of hand sanitizer, which they're sharing with the university community. I mean, it's about using the knowledge and expertise that we have on the campus in what might seem like a very simplistic and easy way of doing it, but can actually, again, I spoke about impact earlier. Hand sanitizer at this moment in time is very impactful and important to people. The other side of these questions are, has there been an impact on research activities and candidatures because of the COVID restrictions? And it would be, completely inappropriate of me to say no, because there definitely has been. I think the university, like so many other organizations, is responding as quick as it can to this. From a faculty perspective, what I can say is that we've tried very hard to work with our students. We've encouraged students who can continue with their research to do so. But there obviously has been impacts in things like labs closing down because it's not possible to social distance, and facilities have been forced to close. The vast majority of our coursework candidates are now undertaking their degrees online for the most part at this moment in time. And certainly for international candidates who are looking to commence their degrees, of course, they've been impacted by the travel restrictions and the closing of borders around the world and so on. So yes, this is very much a difficult time for students and for researchers more generally. I think we definitely recognize that. What I think is important for potential candidates to realize is that we are still accepting applications. So if you are keen to put in an application, we fully encourage you to do so, but obviously speak to your supervisor. I mean, lots of the candidates who I've worked with over the last couple of months have shifted their research plan. So maybe they had planned to do some literature reviews or systematic reviews later in their candidature. They've pulled that to the start of the candidature because they can't actually collect samples or they can't undertake work in the lab, for example. And many of our students, I think, have actually really I think stepped up in this challenging time to look at their research projects and say, well, what is it that I can continue with? What can't I continue with? For those candidates who are already enrolled, some have obviously decided that suspending their candidature at this time is the right thing to do, because it's just impossible to proceed with the project at this point in time. And others who were due to commence their degrees have suspended their degrees or have deferred their start dates as well. So the university is very much open and working with both our current candidates and our potential candidates to try and find solutions. But I think it's fair to say, as everyone will be aware, it's almost on a daily basis that we're hearing new things, new guidelines from the Department of Health and public health officials, new guidelines around travel and so on and things like that. So we are trying to stay abreast of it, and we are trying to stay on top of it and to provide the information as best we can. The university website is the best place to go for the most up-to-date information that we can provide in that regard. So again, I think that's just a very poignant question to look at now. With regard, I have a couple of other questions that I might throw to our student panel, if that's okay. I'm just going through them here. I'm just trying to feel ones that we haven't already answered in some way already. So I might throw this to anyone who actually wants to answer, but have you found that there has been opportunity as part of your research degree to date to engage with industry or to engage with individuals outside of the university? Has there been an opportunity to build your network with people outside of your immediate lab group or your immediate research group? And if so, how did you kind of try to access those kind of networks? Claudia, you unmuted. Does that mean you have a comment on this one? Great.
Yeah, I do. So that was one thing that, how we talked about what would we have liked to know at the start of our PhD. Research is not the only option after you have a PhD or a master's. And so I wanted to explore what else was out there. And I found this program called the IMNIS Mentorship Program. And basically they partner you with somebody that's in industry, either with a background in research or PhD or something like that. But it's about connecting researchers with industry as well as showing you what other options are out there. So I found that to be a really great thing. But definitely you need to take the initiative in finding these opportunities. A lot of them will come through emails, so you might get a lot of emails, but it's worth going through and reading what they are. But other than that, there has been a few times that my department has also had someone from industry come in and maybe tell us about different aspects that are out there and stuff, but definitely there is plenty to go to, and the mentorship program is probably the best thing that I've participated in.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on Ashanti? Do you have anything? Yeah, great.
Yeah, so yeah, that's really good advice from Claudia there. I think if you are not too sure about how to go about finding these kind of programs, another way to find them besides like lots of emails that you can get is see if there are any societies or organizations for your particular field. So I'm part of the Royal Society of Chemistry, which sounds really fancy, but it's not really. You just apply to be a member and you can be a member. And then ones within Australia, there's like a Women in Chemistry group that I'm also a part of. And then they will be posting on their websites, or if you sign up to their newsletter, they will be posting about these kinds of opportunities all the time. So yeah, but you do have to be proactive and go out and look for them a little bit.
Yeah, great. I think that is true. I think that, you know, there's many industry partners who want to connect with the university and the talent and the expertise that's there. But I think this is something that a research degree enables you to do, to build out your abilities in networking and to put your knowledge and your expertise kind of front and center for these partners and ensure that they know that you're there to support them and to take advantage of those opportunities. Juan, did you have anything that you wanted to add to?
No, I was going to say just what you said, Shan, that's one of the advantages of being part of the University of Sydney, that there are always opportunities, and industry partners are always looking for people within the university to collaborate with. So there are many events. Well, this year, a lot of them have been canceled because of COVID. But yeah, you need to take a step forward and look for them and put yourself out there, participate in as many events as you can if you feel like you would gain a lot of this sort of partnerships with industry partners. But yeah, the opportunities are definitely out there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Juan. That's great. We have come to the top of the hour. It's now 2 o'clock here in Sydney, so we are just about to wrap up. I will maybe just jump very quickly to our panel. Is there anything that anyone would like to add as a last, throwaway thought for people to take away with them today, or are we all happy just to wave and say goodbye? Anything, Claudia? Oh, perfect, thank you. Well, listen, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. As I've mentioned, we are living in strange and often challenging times, but we really do appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. There are lots of questions that have come through on our chat and in the questions and answers section that if we haven't answered yet, in some way we'll get to, and we'll respond to each of you individually or as a group for those who have attended the session. So we will get to those questions. There's a lot of questions around just the processes for application to a lot of our programs, which I think would be better answered if we could just provide that detail to everyone in a collective manner. So we will get to those questions. I'm sorry we haven't had a chance to answer some of them in more detail, but hopefully that we can do that as a way of follow-up. So thank you all again. Wishing you all a good day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world from here in Sydney, Australia. And thank you very, very much to our panel for joining me today. I think they can say it better than I ever can. So thank you all very much, and I hope everyone has a good day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.